Okay, so today's story is one of those cases that stays with you.
Like, you watch the footage once and it just kind of moves into your brain rent-free and never leaves. And the more you learn about it, the worse it gets because it's not just scary, it's confusing. So grab a snack, get comfy, pretend I'm doing my makeup while talking about something deeply unsettling, and let's get into the unsolved murder of Missy Bevers. This story starts on April 18th, 2016, in a quiet town called Midlothian, Texas. It's early, like really early. The kind of early where the world feels paused, streetlights are still on, and the only people awake are the ones who absolutely have to be. Missy Bevers was one of those people. She was 45 years old, a mother of 3, and a fitness instructor who taught early morning workout classes through a program called Camp Gladiator. If you've never heard of it, think intense boot camp style workout, maybe just but community focused, encouraging, positive. Missy wasn't just an instructor. She was one of those people. The kind who shows up early, knows everyone's name, and actually wants you to succeed. Her classes were usually held in public spaces, often churches, before the workday started. That Monday morning, her class was scheduled for 5 a.m. at Creekside Church of Christ. And yes, 5. In the morning, Missy arrived early, like she always did. At 4:16 a.m., she posted on Facebook, casually mentioning that it was raining and the workout might need to be moved indoors. Nothing ominous, nothing strange, just a normal post from someone thinking about their class. No one reading it had any idea that less than an hour later, Missy would be dead. Now here's where things take a turn, because before Missy ever arrived, someone else was already inside that church, and they were caught on camera. Creekside Church had multiple security cameras running overnight. Sometime around 3:50 a.m., those cameras captured a person entering the building. At first glance, it looks like law enforcement. They're wearing full police-style tactical gear, a helmet, a vest with the word police across the front, gloves, heavy boots. But almost immediately, something feels off. They're holding what appears to be a hammer, not a baton, not a flashlight, a hammer. And instead of moving with purpose, like someone responding to a call, they're just wandering, opening doors, peeking into rooms, casually trying to pry open locked areas. No urgency, no stress, just slow, deliberate movement, like they're killing time. And this is where the footage becomes genuinely unsettling, because this person stays inside the church for over 30 minutes. 30 minutes of pacing hallways, 30 minutes of swinging a hammer at doors, 30 minutes of waiting. Waiting for what? Or who? Isn't clear yet. But what we do know is this. Missy Bevers would arrive while this person was still inside, and the encounter that followed would end her life. But before we get to that, we need to talk about this person, because to this day, no one knows who they are, and the clues they left behind are some of the strangest in modern true crime. So let's talk about the footage, because this is the part of the case that people obsess over. This is the part that makes your stomach drop. This is the part that has been analyzed frame by frame, step by step, for years. The person inside Creekside Church that morning is caught on multiple cameras from different angles, walking the halls like they've got nowhere to be, but all the time in the world. And the first thing everyone notices? The outfit. They're wearing what looks like full police tactical gear, a helmet, a vest clearly marked police, gloves, heavy boots. Everything about it screams authority. But the longer you watch, the less real it feels. Because no real police officer responds to anything carrying a hammer, and no real police officer wanders around aimlessly, swinging at doors like they're bored. This doesn't look like law enforcement. It looks like a costume. The suspect walks through hallways slowly, deliberately. They stop to look inside rooms. They attempt to pry open locked doors with the hammer. At one point, they strike a door hard enough to leave visible damage. But here's the thing. They don't commit to breaking in. They don't rush. They don't escalate. They don't grab anything and leave. And it's almost like they're passing time, which is terrifying because it suggests they're waiting for something or someone. And then there's the walk. If you've ever heard of this case, you already know. The walk is everything. The suspect has a very distinctive gait, kind of a short stride, feet slightly turned outward, with a noticeable sway. Some people describe it as a limp, others say it looks exaggerated or forced, and almost immediately the internet split into camps. One group insisted the suspect must be a woman. The hips, the posture, the stride. Another group said it was a man deliberately altering their walk, maybe wearing boots that were too big, maybe trying to throw people off. Law enforcement has never confirmed the gender of the suspect. Not once. And that silence has fueled endless speculation. At one point, a woman who lived nearby was publicly accused online because she had a similar walk and worked in law enforcement equipment distribution. She had nothing to do with the case, no evidence, no connection, just internet speculation spiraling out of control. Which is a good reminder that while armchair sleuthing can be interesting, it can also be incredibly dangerous. Another unsettling detail? The suspect doesn't seem concerned about the cameras, and in fact, at one point they appear to look directly at one. No attempt to cover their face further, no sudden change in behavior, no panic. It's almost like they knew where the cameras were, which raises a chilling question. Had they been inside this building before? Or did they do their homework? Let's talk about the timing again, because it matters. The suspect enters the church around 3:50 a.m. Missy arrives roughly 30 minutes later. That's not a short window. That's a long time to hang around somewhere you don't belong, unless you're confident about what's coming next. If this were a burglary, it's a terrible one. Nothing of value was taken. No offices were looted, no electronics disappeared, which makes the behavior look less like theft and more like anticipation. And here's where the footage becomes deeply unsettling on a psychological level. The suspect appears calm, almost casual. They don't flinch, they don't rush, they don't show nerves. This isn't someone acting impulsively. This is someone who seems prepared to be there, prepared to wait, prepared for whatever or whoever walks through that door next. Investigators later confirmed that the police gear was not standard issue, meaning it was likely purchased online or from surplus stores, something anyone could piece together with enough time and money. Which leads to one of the most haunting possibilities of all, that the uniform wasn't meant to fool the cameras. It was meant to fool Missy. Because if you're alone inside a dark church at 4 a.m. and you see someone dressed like a police officer, you hesitate. And hesitation can be fatal. The footage ends before Missy arrives. We never see the confrontation. We never see her face when she realizes something is wrong. We never see the moment things turn violent. Just a person pacing hallways armed with a hammer, waiting. And moments later, Missy Bevers walks into the building, and what happened next would leave investigators with more questions than answers. Missy Bevers arrived at Creekside Church of Christ just after 4:20 a.m. It was still dark outside, rainy, quiet. Her workout class wasn't scheduled to start until 5 o'clock, so she expected to be alone for a bit, maybe setting up equipment, unlocking doors, getting things ready. What she didn't know was that someone was already inside, someone who had been there for over half an hour, someone wearing fake police gear, someone holding a hammer. We don't know exactly how Missy first encountered the suspect. That moment, the realization, the confusion, the fear, was never caught on camera, or at least never released publicly. But investigators believe the confrontation happened almost immediately after she entered the building. There was no long chase, no evidence she tried to flee the church, which suggests something important. Missy may not have perceived the person as an immediate threat. If you walk into a building and see someone dressed like a police officer, your brain doesn't jump straight to danger. You assume authority. You assume safety. That split second of assumption may have cost her everything. At some point after her arrival, a violent struggle occurred. Missy Bevers was found with multiple puncture wounds to her head and chest. The injuries were consistent with a blunt instrument, likely the same hammer seen in the surveillance footage. This wasn't a quick accidental strike. This was intentional, brutal, up close, which immediately rules out something like a random burglary that went wrong. This wasn't panic. This was violence. Missy's class participants began arriving shortly before 5 a.m., And when Missy didn't come outside to greet them, something she always did, they knew something was wrong. They went inside the church to look for her, and that's when they found her body. Inside the same building where she'd taught classes, inside a place meant to be safe, inside a space associated with routine and trust. Emergency responders were called. Missy Bevers was pronounced dead at the scene. Now here's where investigators hit their first major wall. Nothing was stolen, no valuables missing, no forced entry that led anywhere useful, no offices ransacked, no signs of a robbery. The damage seen in the surveillance footage, the broken doors, the pried locks, appeared superficial, almost performative, which raises the question investigators still struggle with today. If this wasn't a robbery, then what was it? There are two main possibilities. The first is the most chilling, that Missy Bevers was the intended target, that someone knew her schedule, knew she'd be there early, knew she'd be alone, and knew exactly where to wait. The fact that the suspect was inside the building well before Missy arrived suggests planning. This wasn't a spontaneous act. This was someone prepared to spend time waiting, and waiting in the dark. The second possibility is almost worse in a different way. That Missy was not the target. That the person inside the church intended to do something else. Vandalize, break in, maybe even commit another crime. And Missy simply walked in at the wrong moment. But that theory falls apart under scrutiny. Because if Missy was a surprise, why stay inside so long? Why not leave when nothing valuable could be taken? Why not run when confronted? Why escalate to lethal violence? Investigators believe the attack happened quickly. There were no reports of screaming heard by nearby residents. No evidence of a prolonged struggle through the building. This suggests Missy was incapacitated early in the encounter. Again pointing to surprise. Again pointing to deception. Another haunting detail? The suspect was able to leave the church undetected. No witnesses saw them exit. No one noticed a person in tactical gear walking away in the early morning, which means they likely blended in, or they knew exactly where to go. By the time police arrived, the suspect was long gone, and despite the church being filled with cameras, none captured a clear image of the killer's face. No fingerprints publicly linked to a suspect. No DNA that led to an arrest, just a timeline, a costume, and a dead woman whose life ended during what should have been a completely ordinary morning. And as investigators began digging into Missy's life, her relationships, her routines, her connections, the case became even more complicated, because the deeper they looked, the fewer answers they found. Once investigators confirmed this wasn't a robbery, attention shifted to the most uncomfortable part of any case like this: Missy's personal life. Because when a crime looks targeted, police always ask the same question first. Who would want this person hurt? And the internet went absolutely feral. Missy Bevers was married, and at the time of her death, she and her husband were reportedly experiencing marital difficulties. That detail alone was enough for people online to latch on and never let go. Her husband, Brandon Bevers, was out of town on a fishing trip when Missy was killed. He cooperated with investigators and was later publicly cleared by police. No evidence, no timeline issues, and no link to the church. Despite this, speculation never really stopped, because once the internet decides someone feels suspicious, facts tend to get ignored. Law enforcement has been clear. He is not a suspect. Then came the rumors of an extramarital relationship. Investigators confirmed that Missy may have been involved with another man around that time. This angle was investigated thoroughly. Phone records, messages, timelines. Again, no arrests. No evidence tying anyone from her personal life to the murder. And this is important because it tells us something critical. If this was personal, the trail went cold fast. Which brings us back to the footage. Because if Missy knew her killer, why the disguise? Why the police costume? Why hide your face? Why disguise your walk? If this were someone close to her, the risk of being recognized would be high. But disguising yourself that much suggests the person was worried about identification, which leans towards someone who did not normally interact with Missy. Another theory that gained traction was that the suspect may have been someone with law enforcement or security experience. The way they moved, the comfort in tactical gear, the calm demeanor, but investigators have said there's no confirmed connection between the suspect and any police department. The gear itself was not authentic issue. Anyone could buy it, which again suggests planning but not professionalism. And then there's the church itself. Some wondered if the suspect had a grievance with the church or knew the building layout ahead of time. But here's the problem with that theory. The suspect doesn't move like someone with a clear destination. They wander, they double back, they check random rooms. It doesn't look like familiarity. It looks like stalling, almost like they're waiting for a specific moment. Now, let's talk about one of the most controversial aspects of this case: internet suspects. Over the years, multiple private citizens have been accused online based on nothing more than similar body shape, gait, or proximity. Careers were damaged, people were harassed, families were dragged into speculation. None of those accusations were backed by evidence, and none led anywhere, which is why police have repeatedly warned the public not to turn this case into a witch hunt. So where does that leave us? No confirmed suspect and no clear motive, no arrest. Every theory hits the same wall. If it was personal, there's no proof. If it was random, there's too much planning. If it was targeted, no one can explain how or why. And that's what makes this case so unsettling, because someone planned something. They brought a weapon, they wore a disguise, they waited, and Missy Bevers never stood a chance. By the time investigators exhausted leads from her personal life, the focus returned to what still made the least sense: the walk, the disguise, and the things the killer did or didn't do on camera. And nearly a decade later, those details are still the loudest clues we have. Nearly 10 years later, the murder of Missy Bevers is still unsolved. No arrest, no named suspect, no explanation that fully makes sense, just questions. And the more you sit with this case, the more you realize that it's not one big mystery. It's a pile of small ones that refuse to line up. Let's start with the biggest. Why the disguise? The police-style tactical gear wasn't necessary. If this was random violence, the outfit only increases risk. If this was personal, the disguise suggests fear of recognition. If this was a burglary, it was pointless, which means the disguise had one real purpose: control, authority. It buys hesitation. And if Missy believed, just for a moment, that the person in front of her was law enforcement, that moment could have sealed her fate. Then there's the weapon. A hammer is intimate, up close, messy. This wasn't a gun. This wasn't distance. This was direct violence, which suggests rage or certainty. And yet, there's no evidence of a personal relationship between Missy and the suspect. No trail, no history, nothing. Just a brutal act with no emotional fingerprint. Now, let's talk about the walk, because it refuses to be ignored. Investigators have never confirmed the suspect's gender. That alone is telling. If it were obvious, they'd say so. Instead, they've allowed the debate to continue, which suggests the gait may be intentional. Boots too large, weight shifted, movement altered. If someone was careful enough to disguise their clothes, why not disguise their walk too? And then there's the waiting. 30 minutes inside a building, alone, armed, and undiscovered. That takes nerve, and it also takes confidence. Confidence that no one else is coming. Confidence that the timing is right. Confidence that when the moment comes, they'll act. That kind of confidence doesn't come from randomness. It comes from knowledge. Another detail that never sits right: the suspect didn't run, they didn't rush out, they didn't panic, and they disappeared calmly without being seen, which suggests they either blended in or knew exactly where they were going. And we still don't know which one is worse. Despite national attention, FBI involvement, and years of tips, the case remains, as you say, cold. Investigators continue to receive leads. The footage is still analyzed. The questions remain open. Someone somewhere knows who this person is. Someone recognizes that walk, that posture, that body language. And yet, silence. Missy Bevers was a mother, a coach, a motivator. She showed up early. She cared about people, and she did everything right. And she crossed paths with someone who had already decided what was going to happen. That's what makes this case so haunting. Not just that it's unsolved, but that it feels unfinished. So the question that lingers long after the footage ends, long after the theories fade, is this. Was Missy Bevers targeted, or was she simply in the wrong place at the worst possible time, with someone who had already made up their mind? Until that question is answered, the person in the police gear remains nothing more than a shadow, walking the halls of a church at 4 a.m, waiting. And that's the story of the unsolved murder of Missy Bevers.